Well, it is New Year's Eve at the time of recording, and that means it is time to talk about the best books I read here in 2022. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and today guys, we are going to be talking about the top 15 books that I read in 2022, but before we get into that, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe as it does help the channel grow, and check the description box down below for the link to the Wizardly Duo Discord, as well as links to all my social media, including information about my Patreon. And that said guys, I'm not gonna lie to you, it was impossible for me to do a top 10, because I had to do 15. And of course I'm going to do honorable mentions because I read 210 books this year, guys. That's Goodreads is telling me it's 93.5 to 94,000 pages in 12 months, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, are all of those pages physically read? No, of course they're not. A lot of that was audio, but that's still a lot to get through. And so I have got 15 fantastic books here, and I believe 3 fantastic honorable mentions. We've got it broken up into self-pub, we've got it broken up into traditional, and we're going to tackle the honorable mentions first. So let's start talking honorable mentions, because I've got 3 of them. And the first one is it's one that's a lot of fun, and there's a huge market out there of people who already have discovered this book. But my little corner here of booktube is just now starting to hear about this. This is Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Denneman, narrated by Jeff Hayes. And I have to say narrated by Jeff Hayes because this is one of those rare books where the audio experience is truly something special. Jeff Hayes just imbues so much character into Carl, into Princess Donut, into all of these characters, and it's really something special. It's hilarious, it's dark, and it's basically just Borderlands in a book. If this is very much like a post-apocalyptic, aliens have come down and made humanity fight in a subterranean dungeon for their entertainment. The apocalypse will be televised. So the first honorable mention is Dungeon Crawler Carl. There's 5 books out so far. Please do yourself a favor and check this one out. On audio, physical read, I don't care how. It's well worth your time. It's fun. It's zany. It's amazing. Next up, we've got Conspiracy by A.C. Cobble, Warhite, Book 1. And this could have easily made the top 15. But, it's just, A.C. Cobble's a very new to me author. And B, all of these other books are just as good. And so it just gets eked out because there's just not enough space on the list. But this is basically, imagine you take the Greatcoats and you take Ryan Cahill's Bound and the Broken and you smash them together. And that's Warhite. Warhite is, instead of taking place 5 years after, it takes place immediately after the fall of the king. And a conspiracy, a group of people, is trying to find somebody to fill the throne, to keep the kingdom going, to fight off invasion, to keep it from shattering, to stop power struggles, what have you. One of the best wizards I've ever read in fantasy. It's got dragon knights. It's just cool. I can't wait for book 2. And this one is something special. Please check it out. And then our final honorable mention is going to be Speaks the Nightbird by Robert R. McCammon. And this makes the honorable mention because it's a historical fiction, and I really loved this book. There's just one scene halfway through this that bumps it to the honorable mention category, because it's one of if you've read Stephen King's it's one of those things where you're just was that necessary? No, it probably wasn't. And so for just a single scene, this gets kind of bumped out of my top books of the year, but it's still a fantastic read. This is Matthew Corbett, Book 1. It takes place in 1699 in Fount Royal, where Matthew and his magistrate, because Matthew is a scribe, they have been called to Fount Royal to pass judgment on a witch, and shenanigans ensue. So that is our honorable mentions. And so now it's time to jump into the next part of this list, and that is the traditional published books. And starting off, I had to, we've got some Stephen Aryan with The Coward. Guys, earlier this year, I would not stop ranting and raving about the Coward. This book is just so good. When were you most afraid is on the back. This is, of course, that lovely broken binding edition with just the fantastic covers. As soon as these were announced, I had to have them. Basically what this is Kel Krasia. Kel Krasia is a hero who his legend might be a little bit overblown. Maybe he just got lucky, and then the story that the bards told just elevated him to this legend status, and now the foe that has come from the frozen north is back again, and they need Kel back. And Kel doesn't want to go. And it's fascinating. There's some great themes of like Survivor's Guild, of just coming of age, of trying to pass the torch. Tons of great stuff in this. I really, really loved The Coward. I can't wait to read more Stephen Aryan. He's got a new series coming out in 2023. Plus, I've got other books of his on the shelf that I still need to get to. So, yeah. And a quick cut-in when you realize that you're done filming and you forgot to include one of your 15 books. That book is David Gimmel's Lord of the Silver Bow. This one is fantastic. Historical fantasy chronicling the Troy conflict by David Gimmel. Oh, chef's kiss. One of the best books that I read this year. It is such an interesting take on these characters. It's got Odysseus. It's got so many fantastic characters. This book is pure perfection. It is the crowning jewel in David Gimmel's arsenal. Please do yourself a favor and check out the Troy trilogy. And back to the video. Next up, this is surprising nobody. If you've been listening to me as I've been making my way through Stephen King this year, you know how I feel about Needful Things. Just the last Castle Rock story is something truly astounding because Stephen King takes the time to settle in and give you all the backstory of these like small town people, and then he just kind of twitches the strings using Leland Gaunt as the antagonist and makes them dance for him. And it's fantastic. It's horrific. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion, and it's this beautiful symphony of absolute chaos. It's awesome. I really love Needful Things. This is my favorite Stephen King book of all time to date, and I think I'm up to about 26 King books read. I know I've still got a long way to go, but I've read a lot of the greatest hits already, and let me tell you what, nothing has hit me the way Needful Things has quite yet. I was left with a 2-day book hangover after I finished that book. Alright, now we're going to get to a little bit of space opera sci-fi. We've got Howling Dark by Christopher Rocchio. And guys, if you haven't heard the worst kept secret in BookTube, or on BookTube, it's the Sun Eater saga. Sun Eater? Is it a saga? We're going to say Sun Eater saga by Christopher Rocchio. Just with Empire of Silence, which I read in 2021, which is why it's not on this list. Howling Dark, Demon in White, both of them could have made this list, but I'm going to tell you what, I put down Howling Dark because it used a mechanic I wasn't prepared to deal with all the way back in November of 2021. And then finally a couple months went by, and everybody was just like, oh, it's so good. And FOMO got me. It just reached out and grabbed me. And I picked up Howling Dark again, and then I marathoned Howling Dark and Demon in White. I'm getting ready to do the exact same thing to Kingdoms of Death and Ashes of Man. Just you wait, because, oh my god, Sun Eater is masterful. It's one of my favorite series that I have read since discovering BookTube. Some of these on this list definitely fall into that category. Next up, we have got Surprising Nobody, another poorly kept secret. We've got Warlord Chronicles, and for me, it's gonna be Winter King. And I know everybody loves Enemy of God in the Warlord Chronicles. For me, there's just something amazing about the Winter King, like getting to know Durfal Kadern and seeing how he fits into the author narrative. It's just something spectacular. And I did these on audio, of course, because Jonathan Keeble's the narrator, and Jonathan Keeble's amazing. He pronounces all those really hard names like Gorfethid and Kina Glass and just Nimue, all of these very difficult names to pronounce, and Jonathan Keeble just takes care of all of it for you. But, I mean, there's just something so so utterly cool because it was a refreshing take that I hadn't quite experienced before on the Arthurian tale. And it's told from an outside perspective of Durfal Cadern, who was a real historical individual, which I didn't know until about the halfway through the third book. I just happened to look it up, and there's a Saint Durfal Cadern, and I was just like, oh. So, yeah, it's fantastic. If you love Arthurian historical fiction, this one is right up the alley, and I just love the way that font just kind of shines on these copies. The UK copies are the way to go, along with the audios, because the US covers are ugly as sin. All right, so that ends our trad pub section. Now we're going just straight full speed at the wall with self pub. We're going to start off this list with The Soul's Aspect, book 1 of The Aspect by Mark Holloway. And here we get to deal with a great coming of age of Kellum, who is on the cover. It says a healer turned killer. But is it as cut and dry as that? There's some great stuff in this story. I featured this in one of my indie spotlights, and the more I've sat with this book, the more I have fallen in love with it. Basically, Kellum, this book and what it puts Kellum through, like, it's borderline what you put Fitz through in, like, Realm of the Elderlings. It's heartbreaking. It's fast paced. It's got a school setting. So if you don't like school settings, you might not like this, but it's an interesting take on a school setting. It's two nations at war. There's an interesting kind of magic system involved. I really liked this one. And I also love the cover on this. So yes, Mark Holloway, The Soul's Aspect, makes the list. Next up, I did an author interview with T.A. Bruno. We're going to do Song of Chimera. And I'm going to hold up In the Orbit of Sirens, because In the Orbit of Sirens, this series, as it progresses, just gets darker and darker and darker. But for me, In the Orbit of Sirens, book 1, is when we get to meet Dunton and Ileana. And we really get to see their young dynamic. There's a time jump between books 1 and 2. But we really get to see, like, what it's like fleeing the soul system, what it would be like to have an AI just kind of rise up Terminator style and shove humanity out of their own galaxy. And it's fascinating to see that fight for survival and then trying to acclimate to a completely foreign and alien world with alien life and vegetation and different rules where you can't even breathe the air without risk of your lungs seizing. And we all have to deal with that. But there's also like a lighthearted note to this book. So, I mean, I love the thoughts and the ideas and the characters and everything that goes into the Song of Chimera. Next up, rolling through with more sci-fi, we have got Zeroed Out by Jacob Markov. This one is a serial killer in a cyberpunk setting where we're post-apocalyptic. Everybody is living in Omega cities, like the world has ended. It is just fascinating. We've got Zed and we've got Ash. And Zed's an enforcer, Ash is a dreamer. They are separate aspects of society. And basically, somebody has started committing murders within Omega City 6. They've got to come together somehow and figure out what's going on. Because in an AI-controlled society, this shouldn't be happening. The AI sees all, the AI knows all, and yet somehow is circumventing the system. It's so good. I loved this book, and it ends with just a question. And I love that question. So yes, Zeroed Out by Jacob Markov makes the list easily. And probably one of my most surprising reads of the year, because I went into it completely blind. Next up, we've got J.C.M. Byrne, Wistful Ascending, Hybrid Helix, Book 1. Guys, if you're not reading Hybrid Helix, come on, what are you doing? It's a space opera with superheroes. It's a perfect palate cleanser. It's just fun. It's day in the life of somebody with superpowers. And of course, living in the day in the life of somebody with superpowers is a little bit more interesting than your or my life, because, I mean, he's got super strength, he can fly, and people like to pick fights with Rowan. He lives and works on a sentient spaceship, Wistful, and he's a retired military man. He is a person of color. He has got a shady past. He's an half alien. There's so much stuff in here. Space bears! Did I mention the space bears? There are space bears in this story. Bears beats Battlestar Galactica. Emphasis on the bears. I love this book. Guys, this is something special. Please check this one out. It's perfect day in the life. All right, up next, we're moving on into our self-pub fantasy on from our self-pub sci-fi. And we are nearing the book of the year. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. So up next, we've got Christopher G. Brenning's The Hellborn King. A kingdom at war and a royal family at war with itself. We've got Damien Dreadfire here on the cover. And I'm going to tell you what, a royal family at war with itself is definitely how I would describe this. This is military fantasy at its best. And this family is just going at each other. This is just a dysfunctional family. They do not work anymore. And it is heartbreaking. And it is tragic. And it is dark. And I mean, guys, like, it's a lot to deal with. Like, I haven't quite moved on to the second book in the series. I'm hoping to here soon, but this one slaps. If you like militaristic, political, dark fantasy, please check this one out, because everybody's grabbing for power. Nobody's quite, like, functional. They've all got these little quirks and curiosities. They all think they know best. And not all of them are very good people. I've done a dedicated book review for this one. If you want to check that out, it will be right up there in the cards. Up next, you didn't think I wasn't going to talk about my buddy A.R. Witham, did ya? Because we've got The Legend of Black Jack. This is Keymark. And, Jack Swift. This is great coming of age. This is like that timeless fantasy, like never-ending story. I mean, what can you say when the story starts out with somebody with a photographic memory gets stolen out of their room by a rhino wizard? Like, that's how the book pretty much starts. I mean, that's not exactly how it starts, but it's very early on in the book. And guys, I mean, the physical copy, I believe, if I remember the number, 21 full-page illustrations. This is fantastic. It reminds me a lot of The Page Master. Jack goes on many episodic adventures. It moves from place to place. We really get to see him grow and find his confidence. And just, it's chef's kiss. So good. I was so happy when I finally read this one, because it truly, truly surprised me. It's just such a delight. So yes, The Legend of Black Jack by A.R. Witham. One of the best books I read this year, and I'm so happy that I did. Now, y'all know I like fantasy westerns, right? Right? I mean, I keep talking about how much I love fantasy westerns. So, No Land for Heroes by Cal Black shouldn't surprise you. And guys, this is fantastic fantasy western, because Mildred Berry, or Millie, is a, like, disgraced war hero in hiding. Like, she's hiding from her past. She's an elf. This has got elves. It's got basilisks. It's got train robberies. It's got six-shooters. It's got robber gangs. It's got... I mean, it's fantasy and western AF. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful blend of all of those elements. It just pulls it off fantastically. Like, I mean, there's a character in here called Sweet Pea. I love Sweet Pea because Sweet Pea is like a demon who wears like those poofy dresses that you see in like Western movies. And she's a demon, and she's fantastic, and she's very sweet, and she's terrifying, and I love Sweet Pea. I want more Sweet Pea in this world, because, it's so good. It's so good. Millie's good. She's angry. She's small. She's scrappy. She's dangerous, and it's fantastic. I can't recommend this one enough. And it shouldn't surprise you guys that L.L. McRae makes the list. With the Iron Crown, we have got Fen, who has lost his memory. We've got Calidra, who is very kind of abrupt. And then, what's the other one's name? You know when you turn on the camera and you start forgetting names. But Giselle. Giselle is her name. There we go. We got Giselle, who's bubbly, but who might be a little bit more tragic. This is the Dragon Spirits Book 1. Book 2 is getting ready to come out here in a few months, I think. And let me tell you what, like, Lauren has created something special here in the Iron Crown, because basically the way it works is for a dragon spirit to form. Dragons are spirits of nature. You have to have like enough concentration of life or enough concentration of worship within a given area, or enough concentrate of a particular element, like iron, the Iron Crown. If you've got a particularly large country that has a particularly large vein of iron, that can develop into a dragon. If you've got a giant lake or an ocean, that can have a dragon spirit. If you've got a big enough forest, that can have a dragon spirit. If you cut down that forest, you can then kill said dragon spirit. It's fascinating the way it works, but guys, she focuses more on the human aspect. There are healthy relationships. Finn has amnesia, and Calidra and Giselle are trying to help him figure out what has happened to him. Calidra is dealing with her past. There is just so many great aspects here in the Iron Crown. This is one of the earliest books I read this year, and it still has stuck with me. I've got nothing but love for this book. Okay, we've got 2 left, and the last one's going to be my book of the year. So next up, we've got Nomads of the Sea by Kobe Zucker. And this is one of those ones where you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, because we got Sig here on the cover. And you may think, oh, well, that's just Fantasy Fabio. I mean, you're not wrong, but at the same time, his eyes are blacked out. He's got cuts on his face. He's got cuts on his pecs. Like, he's been through the wars. And this is a great militaristic fantasy where we get to see multiple POVs kind of come together at the end. And I'm excited for Fishgut Guard 2, because I have no idea where Kobe Zucker is going to take it. But this book feels pro. Like, this is one of the most polished books I have ever read. There's great callbacks. It's just a clean manuscript. And it's just the way that he does the warfare between the two peoples, because you've got the nomads, the nomadic races, where I believe it's the archipelago. Yeah. So basically, you've got these people who fight on boats. They don't wear armor. They kind of dive into water. They can generate weaving between their fingers and breathe underwater and stuff like that for limited amounts of time. And then you've got the mainlanders who wear the heavy armor and they carry the swords. And the way that those two battle, you don't know who's gonna win in a battle, because if they go onto any particular person's territory, one's going to have the advantage over the other. And the way it analyzes that is just so good. And then of course the characters are engaging. Sig is kind of Sig likes hurting people, and that's kind of against what his people believe in. And so they're warriors, but at the same time they don't relish it, and Sig has to deal with the fact that he's different. And there's just so much great stuff in there. And there's also some clever mechanics used in terms of timeline, and I loved reading this book. I loved it so much that I don't know if the camera's gonna pick it up, but the spine is creased. Yeah, I don't think the camera's gonna pick that up. It's a very, very light crease on the spine, but I was so engaged in reading that book that I accidentally creased the spine. And then now it's time for the book of the year. Just play the drums on it real quick, and that is Trudy Skies, The Cruel Gods. Guys, I completely read this off of a cover buy. So basically, when SFF got announced, SFF 8, and they had all 300 books, I went onto all the collected blogs and I looked at the covers, and I picked out books that I wanted to try just purely based on the cover. And The Cruel Gods by Trudy Skies was one of them. And let me tell you what, the way that this book is written, the setting that this is done in is super interesting. So imagine you've got a central hub kind of city, the center of a clock, and you've got domains that go around it, each domain having its own god. Those gods have complete control over their subjects. They can just snap a finger and that person will poof into dust if they so choose. They can heal them, they can kill them, they can do whatever they want to their own subjects. They are cruel gods. And each one embodies something. One is the law keepers, and one is low labor, and one is shape changers. There's just all these different little, everything is well fleshed out in a way that is really dynamic and interesting and makes me want to read more. And basically we've got Kale, and we've got, what's his name? Quinn. I wanted to call him Chris. It's Quinn. But Kale is a shapeshifter. She's this kind of tragic character. Her lover has been taken by the gods, and she is going to do whatever she can to get him back. She is part of a kind of cult called the Godless, who are trying to rebel against the gods. And then Quinn's job is he's kind of a police investigator, He's very good at sussing out, rebellion and murder and stuff like that. And his job is to stop them. But not everything is as it seems. It's just such a great read. This one has stuck with me through 210 books this year. So guys, please check out all of these. Let me know in the comments down below what some of your favorite books this year have been. And guys, I can't wait to talk to you again more about what I'm reading in 2023, because it's going to be another great year. We're going to have a whole new list next year. And I just want to say, have a happy new year. This is, of course, coming out after the new year, but I'm recording it New Year's Eve, so we're going to leave this in. As always, guys, till next time, peace out, stay magical, bye. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons. I could not do this without you.